Welcome to the Non-League Papers, Non-League Goalmouth. My name is Matt Badcock. I'm joined by our executive editor, John Couch, and our special guest today, Mr. Anthony Johnson. Jono, thanks for joining us, pal.
My pleasure.
You are the new Bury FC manager. It's been one of those things when you sort of see that on social media yesterday that the managerial merry-go-round's been spinning in non-league quite a bit this week, but then when we see that, it kind of stops you in your tracks. Obviously, the big news is that your best mate and sidekick for all these last 17 years, Bernard Morley, staying on at Radcliffe. You've decided to come away and take your. I guess this is your. Fair to say that Bury is your dream job because you are a Bury fan, aren't you? Is that kind of talk us through a busy sort of few hours? Imagine the last few days.
Well, the original approach, Bury approached Radcliffe just before, beginning of December, which the club, Radcliffe, the prerogative was to turn the approach down. That was understandable. We had a conversation with Marcus, the owner, and Billy, the chairman, and obviously me and Bern spoke long and hard about it. And I was sort of convinced by Bern that where we were at that point, I think actually we was on a bit of a poor run with Radcliffe. I think we'd just maybe gone forward without a win. Obviously, we've been third and fourth in the table. I think we'd just been beat off Chester and sort of fell out of the playoffs. So it just felt like, just because of that, it was the wrong time. So we didn't even sort of engage in any real discussions, to be honest with you. Bury made an appointment. Obviously, the news came out with that appointment, what happened after that. And then they put the interim in charge. So from our point of view, we've just carried on doing what we were doing. On Sunday night, what day is it today? Because it's been that mad of a week. It's Thursday. So on Sunday night, I got a phone call off the chairman at Bury, Gareth Castick. Basically said that there'd been a change in Tim's work commitments. He was the interim manager at the time, and he couldn't commit to it any longer full time. He wanted to carry on as a coach, but couldn't commit from a timing point of view. So they basically said they're going to have to put the job out for advertisement, or at least speak to the previous interviewees that they'd interviewed when we originally turned it down, unless we wanted the job. I had a conversation with Bern on Monday morning. I didn't ring him on Sunday night. I had a conversation with Bern on Monday morning to say that I'd had a call off Bury, that they reapproached us, if that's a word, but approached us again. And what was he thinking? We had a long conversation on the phone. He sort of alluded to the fact he knew that it had weighed heavy on my shoulders over the last few weeks, couple of months, and said I should take it, but he couldn't, just due to timing. I don't want to. What I won't do is get into why Bernard didn't take the role. That's what I think for him to discuss, and he'll do that in his own time. But from my point of view, we discussed the whys of taking the job. I think the biggest thing for me, apart from all the other stuff that we're all aware of, that I'm a Bury lad and a Bury fan, was that, and I've got to be honest, because it's how I do things, was that I thought if someone else took the job, it would have come available again for a few years. If I don't want to start throwing names out there, but if managers with real quality locally to us took that upon the gig, I just didn't think the job would come up again. And whatever you call that, it really sort of bothered me, because I always thought down the line at some point me and Bernard would take the Bury job, and I was saying to him, look, we've got to take it now. I think if we don't take it now, it would be something I especially will regret. I think we both will regret it, but I especially will regret it, because it'll be one of them things when I look back, when I finish, whenever that'll be, I can say, good or bad, right or wrong, I did it, I give it a go. And that was probably the overriding reason for it. Added to the fact, the fact it's the club I've supported since I was a young boy. We had that conversation. I spoke to, it's going to be mad because we'll probably get into the conversation. The next room over there, next to me here, is Billy Quarmby, the chairman of Radcliffe. I actually work from the football club, which is mental itself, right? So I spoke to Bern, the chairman, who's probably booing me in the other room at this moment.
He's just throwing darts into a post.
My situation. Yeah, absolutely. and then rang Marcus, the owner.
He's got cups on in the walls.
He's throwing things at me. Keeps missing. Spoke with them both, and to say that the conversations that went with them both, and Bern obviously, but with them two, couldn't have gone any better. It was listen, but they might have just wanted rid of me and they were being nice. I don't know, but their understanding of my reasons couldn't have gone any better than I hoped for. You know, as I say, I've never made any secret of what my team is, who they are, and whatnot. But for them to understand them reasons and truly get it, and obviously, I think it softens the blow, the fact that Bernard is a Radcliffe lad who sort of wanted to stay. That softens the blow, I think. So it was, you know, it was a whirlwind sort of 24 hours. Them conversations. I was then trying to convince myself not to go, even though I knew in my heart I had to do it. I was then sort of going because what I didn't want was, you know, anyone else to sort of leave what we built at Radcliffe. You know, if I was going to do it and I was making the decision to take the role, it had to be on my own. I didn't want anything to affect what's happening at Radcliffe, because the season we're having here, or the season that Radcliffe are having here now, is incredible in itself. So what we didn't want to do was rock the boat. So I think it made it much easier from this side of things that everybody else is going to, you know, carry on as normal, and it's sort of me just following my heart for a change rather than, you know, really thinking about things.
John, I suppose the one thing about this is not a normal kind of, you know, managers move clubs all the time throughout, you know, non-league, but this isn't a normal sort of decision, is it? When you've been, the history that you and Bern have got, you know, 17 years together, 6 promotions, best mates, gone into management in your mid-20s. Whilst I imagine it's a sort of an easy decision from the Bury sort of point of view, you know, this is a totally unique one from kind of what you two have built together to sort of make that decision.
Yeah, let's not get away from the fact that everything or any successes we've had has been together. Look, I don't know. My biggest strength is my self-belief, right? But I don't know. I could be the world's worst manager, you know, going on my own. I don't know how it's going to pan out. You know, I've had my best mate on my shoulder for the last 17 years, as you say, and vice versa. And all of a sudden, you know, I've took the decision to go and take this role. But it's important everyone understands I've not done it to manage on my own. It's not like a thing where we've discussed and gone, right, I think it's time we both give it a go on our own. I wanted to be a joint manager until we stopped. The problem is, as I said, you know, when I answered the last question, was that it was an itch I had to scratch. But unfortunately for me, Bern didn't feel the timing was right. So because ultimately it's my decision that's brought the partnership up. And when I say partnership, obviously me and Bern, but we also have a backroom staff that have worked with us for a long time, and players that have, you know, Jordan Hume is an example, that have been with us for a long time. It isn't just a case of me and Bern, it's everybody else. But as I say, it was so important that they carried on doing what we'd done, because if we'd have split the group and I took up a couple of staff members and he did, you never know how it's going to go on. So hopefully Radcliffe will continue to go from strength to strength with what they built. And from my point of view, it's all about starting from scratch, but using all the experiences that I built up over the last few years and taking them. But it was tough. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. There's nothing else that comes remotely close in my lifetime that I've had to make such a tough decision. You know, I've told you before, Matt, that our daughters were born within a couple of weeks of each other. He was my best man at my wedding. Me and Bern and Billy in there went watching Rochdale last night, despite the fact that we'd, you know, already sort of, I'd already took the Bury job. We're friends. You know, we live a mile from each other. It's not like I'm in a different town or a different postcode or I'm emigrating to Australia. It's just the football, you know, the Tuesday night, the Thursday night, the Saturday afternoon stuff is obviously going to be paused for the time being. But from a lifestyle and a friendship point of view, nothing changes. As I said, look, I've really, really, honestly, truly made peace with the fact that I've got to give this a go, rightly or wrongly, and however it pans out, and I'm sure it pans out exactly as I've dreamed and imagined. If it doesn't, I've given something an opportunity. Took an opportunity that I've sort of waited for 17 years, and give it the best shot that I can. Unfortunately, with that, it means that I've had to turn a few lives upside down, and I mean that. I know it might sound like I'm exaggerating the point, but our families, our lives are so intertwined. On I think it was Monday, Tuesday. As I say, I keep forgetting the days. It must have been Tuesday. I spent 2 hours at Bernard's mum's house. And Bern wasn't even there. He was at work. He didn't even know I went round. So Bernard's mum lives in Radcliffe. His brother were there and stepdad. And I sat down and explained my situation. And they were all absolutely buzzing for me. But you can imagine, very emotional. You know, it's not people who watch this, football fans will get it, but people that haven't followed our journey won't probably understand the impact working together has had on our lives and our families. So I knew that. I knew how big of a decision it was to do this, but I've truly made peace with the fact that I've got to give it a go. I've got to give it a go, and I believe it's the right time and the right decision for me to take.
Is there something sort of quite daunting about it, or I mean, it clearly excites you getting getting the job that your dream job, but the fact that you're going alone, and is there sort of any element in the job that you're sort of looking forward to exploring a little bit more? Is there something that maybe you think you could have brought out into your team a little bit more, but maybe held back the fact that you were a partner and now you're on your own, you can say, right, I've always believed in this system, I'm going to go for that instead?
Well, to answer the first bit, there's so much trepidation with the decision because I'm going into the unknown, aren't I? Me and Bernard managed a big club in the past in Chester, a final club, Bury are a bigger football club from a crowd's point of view and a historical point of view, but two big football clubs. And the pressure that comes with managing a final football club, an ex-league club, as you both know, the clubs that have had to restart in non-league or just been relegated to non-league, the pressure that the supporters put on the management teams to get back to where they once belong, regardless of the level that they're at now, is enormous. It's massive. And when there's two of you, and when you're as close as me and Bernard have been, you share that burden. Obviously, the responsibility now at Bury just falls sort of on my shoulders. That's something I'm dead excited about. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to get abused every day, but ultimately it's a results business, and I'm going in there to try and build something over a long period of time for our town and create some sort of legacy. But I'm under no illusions, especially at the level Bury are at now, that the expectation is to win every game of football. And hopefully, if we can win promotion this season, that applies in the NPL as well. I hope people realise how tough it is. We all know how tough them levels are, but the size of the football club has an expectation. And I've always said as football managers, it's not just about winning games of football, it's managing expectation of supporters as well. So there is so much trepidation, but that's sort of outweighed by the excitement side of things. And then the other side of it is you spot on. We were talking about last night, actually, me and Bern and Billy in the pub before the game, that sometimes in a game of football, when you joint managers, you don't have time to go, let's just have a quick 5 minutes about a sub. Everything's on instinct. Everything's really reactionary. You have a plan in your head of what changes you'd like to make if you're 2 or 3-0, but when you're getting beat or it's 1-1 and 7 minutes to go and you've got to make snap decisions, Bernard or myself will just make a substitute. But we've always said, we know that when people say, well, how does that work? Because we've been together so long and we sign every player, it's an agreed thing that we trust every single player on the bench to come on and do a job. Now it solely falls on Bernard Radcliffe, and it falls solely on me at Bury. But our staff, we have our the people that'll be next to us in the dugout that you can still bounce ideas off. But this time it's just I can the staff that I'm inheriting at Bury, a great group of lads, great staff. I'm going to be using them, as a soundboard and asking for advice and using them in terms of what they think and their opinions. But it'll be me. It'll be me that gets the praise, and it'll be me that gets the other side of things if it doesn't go well. So that's another new element of managing on your own that every other manager in the history of football had to go through. It's just that we've only ever done it as joint managers. So you go into the unknown a little bit, but it's always been that way, if that makes sense. We've always sort of reacted in game, depending on what we see. But I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you want to take us back to when you boys first went into management? I always quite like this story when you were 25, Bernard was 24, and you've gone to Harry Williams at Ramsbottom to say, give us the job. And I think his initial reaction was, you could probably swear on here, was quite to the point, wasn't it?
Well, he was planting daffodils. So Harry Williams at Rammy was, he still is. He's still the chairman there now. I think he's 80 now. He's has almost an OCD obsession with the ground. You know, the way he keeps it tip top, the most beautiful ground. You know, from a scenery point of view, where it is with the East Lancs Railway going past and the Peel Tower in the back. It's beautiful. But we turned up one day and he called us mongrels, mongrel dogs. He said, "What do you two mongrels want?" And Bernard said, "This is Bernard. Everyone thinks I take the lead on a lot of stuff." Bernard said, "We want the job." He told us both to piss off. Simple as that. That's exactly what he said to us. The week after, it was really strange because the week after they were playing Badcock. Now, if you know anything about Badcock every single season seems to have they live on, I think it's one of the highest grounds in the country, and they seem to get the most postponements, and because of weather, etc. And they had this season extended, and it was something like the 15th of May. Everyone else had finished 3 or 4 weeks before. We was at Clitheroe at the time. We'd both been at Clitheroe. Bernard left to go to Rammy, and I was at Clitheroe still playing. I broke my leg. It was a Friday night, and the morning after, I was going on holiday to Florida. So it was 2009. My lad was 3-year-old. He's 21 now. And they got beat 6-0. So John Robinson ended up playing for us, being one of our all-time top scorers, especially at Rammy. He scored an hat-trick, and Badcock must have won 6-0. So we went in the bar at Badcock after the game. And at the time, they had an interim manager in Rammy, Paul Williams, who used to play for Coventry. Great guy. And I was sat in the bar, and Harry, the chairman, and Malcolm, his secretary, came and sat with me. I was having a pint, a pre-holiday pint. And he sat down and he said, and Paul Williams came in. So the lads must have been getting showered or whatever. And he came in, he sort of got on his haunches in between the secretary and Harry and said, "So what's the plans?" And he went, and this is Harry all over in a nutshell, and it's a bit cringe-worthy, but he went, "There's no plans, Cop. That's your new manager there. And the other mongrel's in the shower." and he leant over the table in front of Paul Williams and shook my hand. And it was like, what's going on? There'd been no prior discussion apart from us turning up to the ground and him saying what he said. And then that's how Harry Williams worked. Bernard then came in, and Harry said, "Do you want to tell them on me, Cop?" And I said, "We've got the job." But as I say, I went on holiday the morning after, sort of 12 hours later, I was going away. So I was away for 2 weeks. And then our first game as managers, our first competitive game, we played Newcastle Town. We got beat 5-0. First game of the season. And I remember going up to him. Byrne was banned, so I played and he didn't play. So one of Harry's tricks was the fact that he was getting 2 good footballers for the level that they were at the time on the same wage as managers as well. So he was getting 2 managers, 2 players for 2 wages. And that's how Harry thinks. And I said, "Oh, I don't think it's going to work out, Harry. We've been beat." He went, "Win or lose, we booze. Let's go and have a pint." We goes in, has a pint. He said, "Listen, this is the nature of football. You better get used to it. You wanted the job, you've got the job. Don't start trying to get out of it now." And as it happened, Newcastle Town broke some sort of record where they went and won the first 28 games. And they'd literally won the league by, say, the 10th of January. It was incredible. We ended up finishing, I think, 3rd or 4th, which was like a 10-year high. But at that time, you get beat 5-0 and you think, it doesn't get any worse than this. Do you know what I mean? What we've done. But they went on to have this amazing season, and we went on to have an amazing season as well. So that was right at the start of the journey.
Yeah, it's been such a mad journey as well, isn't it? Because you've done obviously what you achieved there, but then to go to Salford together in this sort of totally unique spotlight that nobody has ever kind of really had to sort of deal with. You don't see many joint managers as it is, let alone with sort of Sky cameras following them around and all that sort of stuff. You can't probably have imagined back then when you first started what you've kind of gone on to achieve, the highs, the lows that you've had. Look,
do you know what? I said to you before about my self-belief, but I border on delusional. So I've always, in the documentary, they said, "What's your ambition?" I said, "What, be the England managers? Let alone me, or we want to join England manager." And Byrne used to cringe his back out. He hated it when I said stuff like that. And we said, Rob Draper, who was obviously the chief correspondent for England, wrote, the Class of '92 book, which we're in, and he was with us for 6 months of the season. I used to say to him, I said, "We will. I'll get to the level that we want to get to." And I know people used to think, we were bonkers. But I always believed that. But if someone would have, we always talk about reflection. If someone would have said back in May 2009, you're going to work, your second job's going to be with Gary Neville, Nicky Butt, Paul Scholes, Ryan Giggs, Phil Neville, you would have never believed it in a million years. It would have been absolutely impossible to believe just working for them. Forget everything else. And not actually knowing, because we didn't have a clue when we took that role, when we took that job, that they were filming any documentary. We didn't have a clue.
Mm-hmm.
People forget we actually dropped a league, a bit like what I've done here with Bury. Ramsbottom in the NPL, we'd had 2 promotions. We dropped a league to go to Salford. People forget that. So that was a bit of a risk on our behalf. So we took the Salford job, met with them guys, and literally, so Scholes and Phil Neville had took the team the day we went to watch them. They beat Kendal, I'm going to say 2-0. There was about 250 people there. That was it. That was the crowd, if that. And they came up to us after the game, shook our hands, said, "Welcome to Salford. Do you want to go and speak to the lads?" And I went, I'm full of confidence and whatever. And I walked in, and as the door opened, we used to be in the old port cabins at Moor Lane, as you know, as you said, at the Notts County bit.
Yeah.
Walked in, and this light came on us, like a camera, the TV crew, like blinding light. And I'm like, I'm ready to give a bit of a speech, and that come on, and I can speak, about anything to anyone. Waffle for days, as you know. That come on, and I was like stunned. I was like, "What do you do here?" Danny Webber of Man United was the first player I saw sat there, and I said to him, I said, "Look, I'm not going to make you a better footballer, Danny Webber, but I'm going to make you a better team." And I thought, bang, bingo, perfect, nailed it. And that was it. That was day one at Salford. That was the start of it, and that was where we thought. That was when I knew we'd been thrown in at the deep end. That was a real no training. No explanation. No, you're at Salford. This is what we're doing. Because, what Wrexham are doing and all these other clubs and Dorking and whatnot have been incredible. But Salford, I know back in the day there was the Atkinson thing and Peter were back in the 2000s. But this was the real first documentary that that was on primetime TV. And you're like, they're coming into your house. Like the wife used to cry, getting upset because she hadn't cleaned up and in case the camera picked up on something. Like genuinely. Plus, you're trying to win games of football. Plus, you've got the pressure of the owners. Plus, you're everyone's cup final because when they play the teams from other clubs are turning up, you've got cameras out. It was wild. It was that I think that was 3.5 years. That 3.5 years was life changing in a lot of ways because overnight, the Notts County game we talked about, Matt, the FA Cup game was on the Friday night. The night before, it was like it was all scripted. The night before, the first documentary series came out. So on the Thursday night, it had like 2 or 3 million viewers on BBC 1 9 p.m. And the next night, we were on TV beating Notts County. So it was like it was written, like a script almost. And as you can imagine, overnight, you're in the papers and people are recognising you. And the crowds, were sort of 20-fold from 250 up to a sellout every game. And it was just, if someone would have said to you back then, this is what's going to happen, it would have been impossible to believe. We had no criteria or experience or qualifications to be in that sort of that environment. So it was wild.
As you said, that threw you in the deep end. But what sort of looking back now? What did you learn from those days? What will you take most from your time at Salford?
I think when you work with Gary, if you just park everyone else for me, when you work with Gary Neville and you see him on TV, what you see on TV is what you get. I remember you used to wake up. I'd get up. I don't know. I think I was getting up early at 6, 7 o'clock. You'd had an email at 4 o'clock in the morning off him about players or whatever, and it was just the intensity and relentlessness. Listen, he's a special case in the sense that he worked for Sir Alex Ferguson, who everyone's heard the stories about how he outworked absolutely everybody. There was a story about Sven that Sven had pissed him off about something, so he purposely rang him up at half-6 in the morning because he knew he'd be asleep. So he's learned off the absolute master of psychology, the greatest man manager of all time. And you could see, or I felt I could see that in Gary. Gary, Sir Alex had rubbed so much off on him, unbelievable mentor to have. And that sort of fed down to us. And you think you're doing all right in life. You think you're doing all right in football. You think you're quite successful, well, relative to the levels you're at. Until you bump into and meet certain people and you realise you don't even scratch the surface of how some people demand of themselves. So I think that learning from Gary and the rest of the lads there was that you need to, if you're going to sort of pursue something, you have to be all in. And I think I always tell people that I used to put a target on other managers' back. So back in the day when we were young, you had Liam Watson, who won the National League North 2 or 3 times. You had Neil Young, who went through the leagues with Chester. We used to put targets on the back and go, what are they doing up there? How do we get to where they are? And they were 2 or 3 leagues above us at the time. And when you catch them up and surpass them and you beat them, you're almost like, everything you sort of thought about back in the day that where you wanted to get to and what you was doing. I've told these guys this, by the way. Mm-hmm. When I met them, I explained to them, they were, people look at Pep Guardiola, Sir Alex Ferguson, all these people. Mine weren't that. I was looking at realistic targets of where we could and how we could get there. I remember pieces back in the day in the non-league paper we used to do at the end of the season. I think you had Liam Watson, Gary Brabbin, and different managers on there discussing about who they thought would win the league next season and how they would do it. And I was in the North West Counties reading this stuff, going, how do I get there? How do I catch up to what these guys are doing? What are they doing? And I think going into Salford and listening and watching how them guys work, because we were involved in so much, meetings and whatnot, taught me some valuable lessons in terms of work ethic. You think you're working hard, you think you're out watching games, but you go out and watch a game of football, and I'd always recognised there'd be John Flanagan there who was coming through the league with us at Curzon Ashton, and you thought, I think I'm busy, and he never misses a game. So if I'm doing that, who's got a target on our back? Who's watching us? Younger managers coming through that what we did always kept us on our toes, and I think that we always have had a very, very high work ethic, but I think going in there really exaggerated that point.
Is also the dressing room as well, because the characters that you've sort of had, some of them have been with you at different clubs. Talk about like Jordan Hillman, but generally, is that kind of the fundamental for everything or all success is how tight that you can get that dressing room and the sort of characters that you have in there to play in these unique circumstances. Salford was totally unique because you say you were expected to win every single week, and obviously you did succeed in everything that you were trying to do there. But the same at the other clubs as well. Obviously, what you had at Radcliffe and what you're going to hope to have at Bury. How important is that, those characters in there, and how you guys work with them and get the best out of them?
It's the most important thing. There's nothing come close to having the right personnel, people around you. But in a changing room, I think the one thing that we've always had, and we've had it thrown at us as a negative, by the way, and I think a lot of managers do that, move clubs, like you take the same players with you. There's a reason people do that, is because they get you, they understand you, you want players that are in the same mode as how you manage. So we've always looked at players and go, do they, on the pitch, do they play like we manage in the changing room? And if we're not in the changing room, is the message still the same? We've had some absolute lunatics over the years play for us. Some of the biggest lunatics that have ever played non-league football. I think you think of Jordan Hume, Mike Phoenix, George Green, Gary Roberts, Gary Stopforth, but the best people you'll ever meet in your life. Absolute winners. We had a lad called Danny Warrender, who was our captain at Ramsbottom, and when we talk about having someone who plays like you manage and mirrors you, and the players get it and understand, he was that person. And listen, generations have changed. The crazy thing is, and I always talk about this, like Jordan's 35 now, I'm 43, and I see Jordan as the last of my generation. So if my generation's oldest age is 50, he's the youngest at 35, right? So I look at the group at Radcliffe now. We've got a handful of lads who are 23, 24-year-old, Matt Sargent, Rio Clegg, Danny Greenfield, Michael Afue, unbelievable talents. But I look at them and I see us in them. I'm not saying that we've moulded them into what they need to be in terms of winners and understanding a changing room, but you think that generation's coming to an end, and then you see the way they put expectations on each other, the way they train, the demands they put on one another. So, and that keeps you going, because you always, I said in my interview yesterday at Bury, and we've talked about it quite a bit, Matt. I'm very nostalgic, me. I'm very, very driven by being a Bury fan as a kid and what we've done in the past. I think that's really important that you remember where you've come from. So when you go in a changing room, if you've got, and I'm going to a changing room blind at Bury, let's not get away from that. I know some of the players were at Radcliffe, some have gone to Bury, and 1 or 2 have played for us in the past. But I'm going to a changing room that is 10 unbeaten, or 9 unbeaten, I think they are under Tim. that are second in the table can go and win the league. You know, I'm going into an environment that he's already winning. So if I go in there and kick the door down and like people expect me to, I could ruffle feathers that don't need ruffling. So the art of management is understanding where a club is at that moment in time, and seeing what it is they need. From my point, you keep doing what you're doing. You know, I'm going to, believe it or not, I want to try to keep my mouth shut for as long as possible until it's required for me to sort of put some stitches in an open wound. But at this moment in time, you know, they're flying. But I think that's the most important thing. And I would, you know, from an advice point of view to any managers coming through, younger people coming through, if you get the right people around you, get the right changing room, you can't lose. You're going to lose games of football, but you're going to get to where you want to get to, because you will always bounce back from a loss with that type of mentality. And we've had the best, you know, and I include this changing room now at Radcliffe, what we've built and what I'm leaving behind, that it's top. But Jordan Hume sat there, you know, there's a lot of experienced players in there: David Ball, John Taylor, Dan Gardner, Lewis Maynard. These have all been incredible footballers in the Football League, in non-league, and then you've got your young lads coming through. So we've always tried to keep a group of players, and as they get older, you bring the next group through. So when the older ones pop off, these lads that are 23 now, 28, 29, and it just keeps on moving like a conveyor belt. It's just the way we've done things, and it's worked for us.
Yeah, quite interesting the way. Well, like when you talk about sort of going into a Bury with a winning culture, I mean, it's quite unusual in that like in that respect. You're walking into, well, you're inheriting a squad that are winning. But even more so with Bury, you know, given the expectation on your back, I mean, I'm guessing your remit is promotion straight away. Does that put pressure on you straight away, or does that make life easier to sort of settle in?
No, I think I wouldn't take the job if there wasn't any pressure. And I'm not trying to be cliche here. You know, I don't want a job where you go in and you go, oh well, if we lose a couple. Look, I said yesterday in my interview, right? Everyone knows that Bury, and people, this, I don't know why, but this pisses people off because it happened at Salford. Bury's everyone's cup final at that level of football. I don't know why they get upset about that. That's just what it is. But we can't use that as an excuse when we don't win a game of football. We've got to use that and harness that. So what we created at Salford was, we knew it was a smaller football club than, say, Darlington, who we came through the leagues with. We knew it was a smaller club, but we had a bigger budget. So you couldn't play the underdog mentality because of who the owners were, right? So what we had to do was create a siege mentality as opposed to an underdog mentality. At Radcliffe, I could play the underdog card every single day of the week. We're a tiny football club, so the underdog mentality takes the pressure off you. When you go into a club like Bury, Salford, Chester to a degree, the pressure's on you from day one. So you've got to change that mentality, and it becomes a siege mentality as opposed to it being the underdog mentality. That I feel like in them environments is where, you know, one of them two is where you thrive. So you're going into a team that has won its last however many games, is 9 unbeaten, is absolutely flying. You don't that it's a luxury you don't often get afforded. You're going into football clubs that are struggling. You're trying to change the mentality around, maybe with the intensity that I bring to the table. That when I go in tonight for my first training session, won't be what's required. It'll be something totally different. It'll almost be like I have to sort of stand back, try and sort of blend into the wall, and just sort of be there from a support point of view. You know, I see my job at coming into Bury over the next couple of games, the next week or two, of just taking the pressure off the coaching staff, making the tough decisions, and doing that stuff. But all the training, all the style of play, all the messaging has to stay the same. It has to do, because even if I keep it the same as it is, and it sort of goes the other way, that's on me as well. Because I'm taking that risk of going, right, okay, you carry on doing what you're doing, but my presence might have a negative effect. I know and understand that better than anybody. But then it allows me, if that's the case, then to step in a little bit quicker. So I've got a couple of scenarios that you start to set up in your mind about how it can go both ways. I can't go in there and think everything's going to be roses in the garden. You know, I've got to think worst case, and I've got to think best case scenario. Best case scenario is we win every game and win the league with a couple of games to spare. Worst case scenario is that my presence doesn't work out straight away. How do I turn that around? You know, if that's how it goes. So there's pressure, but I don't feel it in a way of, oh, we've lost a game. I feel it as the football club needs pressure to get to where it's going to go. Otherwise, we're not going to win as many games as we need to win. And I think it's that simple for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was last season, at the start of last early on in last season when you talked about Radcliffe, and I don't want to sort of put words in your mouth, but I think it was kind of sort of saying, you were obviously out of the game for a little bit, both of you, weren't you? And then you were kind of saying, you weren't sort of desperately sort of chasing kind of getting back in, and Radcliffe kind of then came along and it was right. And is it right to sort of say it kind of rejuvenated you a little bit, this sort of that period, and kind of relit your fire for management?
Yeah, I think, it's mad. I'm 43-year-old, right? Bern's the year younger. We've managed 770 games, 17 years. Most managers are probably starting at our age. You look at Neil Dans, who's been an incredible footballer, played in the Premier League, played in the Football League, been top player. He's in his first season at Southport and he's older than me. A lot of people are starting off. So when we came out of Spenny, and it had been relentless for, what was that at the time, 14 years, I think, we were tired. We were pretty tired from the drive, to be fair, from Manchester to the northeast more than anything. But we were drained. We needed a reset. We needed time. And then I think we was out, I'm going to say 9-10 months between leaving Spenny, coming into Radcliffe at the end of the season. My point of view, again, we've spoke about this a lot. On reflection, I realised the most important things to me were the obvious things that were the most important things to all of us. But when you're a football manager, you lose sight of it. So spending time with the wife, spending time with my children, the dog, and I went working with my mate Dee, labouring. It was a choice I took. I didn't want to go back doing my old jobs, driving wagons. I went digging holes, and I loved it. I absolutely loved every minute of it, and it was like the nuts and bolts of life again for me. Because we've been on this mad journey, an exciting journey. 1 minute I'm working for Gary Neville, next minute I'm in a hole, literally in a hole, digging, smashing gas pipes, and him telling me off all the time for peanuts. But I was loving it. And when Bern told me about the Radcliffe job coming up, because the previous manager was now at Marine, Bobby Grant, had done a top job. We were taking over a decent group. I was like, do you know what? We've done all these hard yards to go from the North West Counties up to National League North. We've won the National League North. We lost our job. We should have been in the National League. Salford, we left Salford, who are having a great season, by the way, now. We left Salford in 2018, right? We won 3 promotions in 3.5 years. They've won 1 since we left in 8 years. So who's to say that was the right decision by them? But the point is that we didn't get the opportunity to manage in the National League. So I was almost like beat up with it all. I thought, I actually, funnily enough, didn't know the very thing was coming. I put a tweet out on Sunday. We'd managed our 300th game in the National League North on Saturday, which I take so much pride out of. But then when I sit back, I go, why have we managed so many games at this level of football and never sort of gone on? And the fact that we're joint managers, that's the fact that some people have a perception of us. The fact that perception is sometimes about money, even though if the budget's 10 grand for a manager, we split it in half. Regardless of all that stuff, we scare people off, I think. If I'm being blunt with it. So when we had that time, I was done. I didn't want to be done, but it was only once I was in it, I thought, I don't want to go back in. We've done everything we can do. We're not going to get an opportunity anywhere else. We went and sat with Marcus at his house, the owner of Radcliffe, Marcus McCabe. We went and sat with him, me and Bern, and I was waiting to be convinced. And I've said to you, Matt, in the past, I had to make peace that I was an unemployed non-league manager and not an unemployed National League North manager. You're as good as your last role. So I wasn't waiting for a National League North job. I thought I was, but in reality, you're just unemployed, aren't you? So once I made peace with that, once I listened to what Marcus said, once I saw the sort of sparkle in Bern's eye that this was the job for us, because Bern's talked about the Radcliffe gig for years. And we sat with him and everything felt right from a budget point of view and whatnot. But knowing he was going up against Macclesfield, and I got in, it didn't just sort of reinvigorate me. It sort of felt like day one again. It felt like I'd not done it before, and the excitement was back, and it was local. You literally, I live where I'm sat now at Radcliffe's ground. I live 1.4 mile away. Burnley's about 800 yards. So everything else came easy. And there was no, and I said this, and this will bite me on the backside in a few years if I tell a lie. I had no interest in any other job. Not an ambition point of view. I knew we weren't going to go and get a Football League job as joint managers. I knew we weren't going to go get a National League job. If we wanted to get somewhere, we had to take Radcliffe there. and that applies to what I've done now at Bury. You know, I'm not doing this to try and get a foot on the ladder to go and get a job elsewhere on my own. That's not why I'm doing it. You know, if this lasts the length of my contract, if it lasts 3, 4, 5, 6 years, the last 10 years, 15 years, the last 6 months, I've done what I set out to do right at the beginning. No one will ever take away what we've done. But there's the days of sort of chasing after something that doesn't probably exist for people like me and Bern, as well, sort of dissipating now. And we know that, or I certainly know now that if I'm going to do something, now I've got these ambitions to take Bury back to where I think they belong, you've got to do it with them.
I just wanted to touch on actually, because I was thinking just as you were talking, like we've seen Gavin Cowan do it over the last couple of weeks. Do you think those opportunities exist for non-league managers in the Football League now?
Gav Cowan getting that role. You remember, right? Gav lost his job at Salford. Probably had 18 months out of the game before he turned up at Radcliffe, and the job he's done at Radcliffe. Radcliffe have been stuck in National League North for the last, God knows, it seems to finish third every year and don't go up under Kev. Gav's gone there, got promoted. What a job he's done. I mean, incredible to win the league, you know, against all the full-time sides last year, Scunthorpe, Kiddie, Chester, and deserved that job. Absolutely. I think when you look at Gav as well, one, he's done an incredible job, but two, he's got an affinity to Shrewsbury, a bit like me with Bury. So I think that made it probably a little bit easier. He's earned the right for that job, but I just think football's changed a lot now, where a lot of clubs would rather go down a route of potentially a young manager, maybe someone that's been promoted, who, you know, a different route, whatever that reason being, or you see a lot of journeyman football managers. You know, if you win one promotion from League Two, doesn't matter how poorly you do for the next 5 years, you'll get another few jobs out of it. That's the nature of football management. Probably people said that about me and Bern in the lower leagues. You earn the right to get a few jobs. So, no, I think the model, you know, the joint managers of me and Bern, I think the documentary, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It set us up in life. It set us, you know, with outside of football as well. But I don't think that painted a picture that owners, CEOs, chairman probably want as football managers. Why? I don't know why. You know, I thought when you watch it you try and watch it as a neutral and take your rose tinted glasses off. I thought we came across as nothing but winners. But I understand. If I say we can come across as scary, that makes it sound like, I don't know what that makes it sound like. But I do truly believe there are people out there that don't fancy arguing with them too. And we're not like that. You know, as I said, I'm still at the football club that I've just left because we're not bad blokes. Might not necessarily always be nice blokes, but we're good blokes. We make right decisions by people. And I just think probably over the years, there might have been an opportunity when we were a little bit younger if we'd have done it in a different way. We've decided who we are. We've stuck to our morals and values, and that's led us to where we are now. And we've had a brilliant time doing it the way we've done it. You know, the way we play football, the expectation we put on our players. But from a development point of view and a moving on point of view, you know, honestly, that for us, that ship sailed. I think for other managers, you know, your younger football managers, your Callum McIntyres that have come through, as I said, in a certain way, I think the door is definitely open for people. I don't think it's been shut on young up and coming football managers.
Yeah, one thing, you know, obviously we've spoken lots down the years, and you know, maybe people don't give credit for, I don't know if that's the right phrase really, but you know, your love of non-league and your sort of understanding of it, and how much, you know, we've had conversations about all sorts of different parts of like the country. It's not just, you know, your sort of patch. You really do kind of follow everything and sort of digest everything and look at what other people are doing, and kind of sort of feel like you've got a real affinity and love for these levels.
Well, me and Bernard have been talking about, Bernard has been talking about Rochdale for the last couple of months, about their style, what Jim McNulty's doing. When you think he's up against York and Forest Green, we went to watch him last night. We went to watch Rochdale. Me, Bernard and Billy, the chairman at Radcliffe, went to watch that game. Just to back up your point a little bit, you know, we're football. We're all football fans. You know, I go on. By the way, what an unbelievable representation of non-league football. It's not. I don't even know why we call it non-league anymore. But you'd have put them two against a League One, average League One side last night. They'd have took them to the cleaners. Right, it was unbelievable game of football. Rochdale have their way of playing. Jim McNulty has his way of playing, and Robbie's set up in the first half or half an hour. You think Rochdale couldn't get out, and it was like you felt like you forget you're a football manager, you're just a football fan. You're watching a top game of football. So we're students of the game in that aspect. You know, I don't use the lingo and jargon that a lot of new age football coaches and managers use, because, as I say, you know, we come from a different era and a different generation. And as you said, you know, maybe the thought on how we are as people maybe not be fair at times. You know, I've got a huge growth mindset in terms of how I live my life, and I'm always trying to get better and speaking to people from advice. And Bern certainly does that. As I say, it was his idea because he wanted to go and see how Rochdale do what they do, which we're always trying to get better, even at our age and after all these games. But I think the perception of us is probably a lot different to what the actual reality is. You know, we're hard working managers. What does that mean, hard working? Well, you've got to be at games every night. You've got to see different styles. You've got to understand why they play that way. You know, what does the pitches look like, and how do you have a plan B? What does plan B mean? So all these different things that we go through as younger managers, it's trying to sort of pick apart what they all actually mean, and then being able to put them into place when you put a training session on. So listen, we know what we've done. The days of worrying about what the people think about us are well gone, because we know what we do. You know, from a work ethic point of view.
Mm.
So picture the scene then. I mean, talking sort of later in the year now, FA Trophy, maybe even County Cup, whatever. Radcliffe against Borough. Against Bury. You against Bern. What do you do? There's obviously a little bit of personal pride there at stake. Do you do something a little bit different? Do you try and outwit each other? How does it plan out?
Well, there's an annual friendly now. The chairman who passed away a couple of years ago, Paul Hilton. You know, in memory of Paul, who was an amazing figure in the Bury of Bury from a grassroots and non-league point of view. You know, the impact that he had. So each summer there's a game. We beat Bury last summer for the Paul Hilton Trophy. So there'll be a trophy on the line in either June or July this pre-season, and bragging rights on the line. But you know, we being at Bury now, we're 2 years behind Radcliffe. You know, depending on what happens at the end of the season, Radcliffe win promotion, it could be 3 years. Radcliffe don't win promotion and Bury do, it could be 1 year behind. So my focus is on closing a gap for Bury. You know, I hope and pray, and I'll be watching Radcliffe from afar. And when we're not playing, we're watching. I hope, you know, we continue to beat the odds at Radcliffe to get them as far as they can. From my point of view at Bury, it's about getting back to where they are as quick as possible. You know, support the crowds to get at gig are incredible. But they only come to watch winning football. If you're not winning games of football, they don't. We've got too many big football clubs on our doorstep for people to disappear to. So we've got to win games of football. But that it's never going to be a rivalry because me and Bern are best mates, and the coaching staff and players, we're all so close. But I think last year we played Bury in the FA Cup just by the way it fell. We played them in the FA Cup. Bury beat us. Bury beat Radcliffe, deservedly so. So you never know what's going to happen in cup games. But I'm just purely concentrating on trying to get out of this league, and then hopefully that trophy in pre-season, I can be on it above my head, right in front of Bern.
Free yourself on for penalties in the penalty shootout.
100%.
But we're taking up a lot of your time, mate. So I'll just finish up with one more, because I think we said 25 minutes, and here we are an hour later nearly. But you sort of retweeted a message from Bernard's wife, Gemma, which, you know, really sort of nice, sort of gave an insight into kind of what you boys have been through, since she's, you know, for the last 17 years and longer. Obviously, you've known each other for such a long time. But there was sort of a nice message in there where she sort of said to you, you know, go in, this is your dream job, go and be unapologetically you. Is it nice to sort of have everyone's backing and sort of blessing, and now you can go forward and be right, I'm the Bury FC manager, this is kind of my pinnacle of what I wanted to get to, and now I've got to go and take my chance, kind of thing?
I think honestly didn't expect the sort of the feedback from me leaving to be as good as it's been, from a support point of view and an understanding point of view. Obviously, Bern's family are like family to me. You know, Gemma's almost like a sister to me. We've known each other that long, and you know, that message, as much as it you know, you read it and I feel emotional from it. We live that life every day, and that's what she's like as a person anyway. But to get the support of everybody, and every single person supporting me, I couldn't have anticipated or expected anything like it has been. So people understand my reasoning. People understand where I'm at, where I wanted to go with it. I've took a decision. I don't see it as a risk in the slightest. It'll either work or it won't. I don't see it as a risk at all. But to have the support of my friends, my family, Bernard's family, is all that mattered to me. You know, I don't care about the outside noise. I never have done. But in terms of the people that I love, that I care for, and love and care for me, it was so important that I had that I could go and leave and not have any niggles at the back of my mind of what they thought. So to have everyone's blessing and understanding, because listen, there's been a few tweets this morning. People are almost looking, going, who do these guys think they are? You know, no one's passed away. No one. We're talking about two tin pot football, non-league football club. Who do you think they are? You guys know the journey we've been on. You guys understand the relationship that me and Bern have lived, and the people closest to us all understand how strong it's been from an emotional point of view. So they won't get that. They never will. That's okay. You know, I don't care either way. But from the people that are closest to us, it was dead important to me. And it just means I can go and take that next chapter, that next step, knowing I've got the support of every single person around me.
Well, we'll look forward to following every part of the next chapter, mate, and still be bothering you as we so often do. I appreciate your time coming on here today, and yeah, all the best with the new gig, mate.
Thanks, boys. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh man, John, we'll speak soon.
See you, boys.
Thanks, everybody.